and welcome back. Welcome back. He's considered by many analysts, tennis critics and former and current players to be the greatest tennis player of all time. A 16-time Grand Slam winner, he's one of 7 male players to capture the career Grand Slam, and after holding the #1 position for a record 237 consecutive weeks, he's now ranked world #2 by the Association of Tennis Professionals, but he's hoping he's on the way back again there. Roger Federer is in London this week for the ATP World Tour Finals, and I had the pleasure of meeting him at his hotel earlier. You're described as the, understandably, as the complete tennis player. Do you think as of now you are the complete tennis player, or are there parts of your game, aspects of your play, that you still think you can improve?
I mean, I still feel like I can still improve my volleys, my second serve, my backhand, my returning. You know, if it's not on power, then it's maybe just being consistent, you know, not just being consistent through a set, but then a match, and then the whole season, and so forth. You know, consistency is a funny thing, and for us it's very, very important as tennis players. So that's why I think we all strive to become better, and I think we actually push each other to become better, because nobody's just sleeping at home. Everybody's going to hitting the practice courts and trying to become a better player.
What is form and off form? I mean, it's curious. I mean, you have more on form days than anybody else, but do you know on a day when you're going to be off form and you're not injured, do you know before you hit the first ball that it's going to be a difficult day?
Well, I mean, I think there's never a guarantee for any match that you're going to come out and play great. And sometimes you feel real bad going into a match, and then you realize you're actually playing the match of your life. And sometimes you feel wonderful going into the match, and then you realize it's just not your day. So I think the feeling you have shortly before the match, it's not like in school where you feel like you're perfectly prepared for a written test. You know, sometimes it just works and sometimes it doesn't. With us, obviously, the opponent has quite a big say as well. What's going to happen on your side of the net as well? And is he going to try something different, something he's maybe never done against you before? But I think the best players, they find a way to win regardless of who's opposite to the net. They just work, you know, their way through their own problems. And that's what I think I've done for many years, and really well, actually.
And are you conscious with certain players, in cricket it's fast bowlers who can psych batsmen to be scared of their bumpers or whatever like that. Are there certain players at certain moments that you know you've got a certain hold over them? You can psych them because of your service or because of your backhand or whatever. Do you have a moral control of them?
Well, I think maybe more just if the head-to-head is really one-sided, more than just my game. Sure, the occasional player doesn't like the way maybe I'm playing or the way I'm able to mix it up versus other players. That is the case, but then usually also the head-to-head speaks quite a clear language. And I just think if you have beaten a guy over 5 times, you know how to play that guy. You could have maybe lost 10 times, you know, or 15 times, but as long as you can beat the guy 5 times, that means you know how to play that player.
I see, yes, absolutely. And in terms of moving on from now to the future, do you think, you're incredibly young now, certainly compared to me, but in any case, do you think you can go on getting better to 28 to 30 to 35, or is it only a question of somehow keeping your extraordinary high standards now, or can you get better from here on?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I am a better player than when I won my first Wimbledon back in 2003, and this year I didn't win it. So, for instance, but I still feel like I'm a better player today. I'm more complete, I'm more powerful, I'm more experienced. There's so many things going for me today that back then was really a question mark. So
yeah, and physically you can still do, obviously. 28 now? Is it?
29, yeah. So I just turned 29.
So that you don't look a day over 28. But I mean, so that at that age you don't have to worry about. I mean, sometimes swimmers or divers get worried they're over the top, or.
No, I don't feel that way. I feel more like I just got to be careful for my fitness, that I stay healthy, that I don't get injured, that you know, have a schedule that allows me to have also breaks. I just got to be smart about everything I do now and learn from my mistakes. Whereas in the beginning, you're looking for what you need to do. Now I know what I need to do to play well, but it's about keeping the fire burning as long as possible, because my goal is still to play for many more years to come.
Many more years to come. Another 10, do you think?
I don't know about 10, but I mean, obviously, big goal is the London Olympics, held at Wimbledon, which is going to be very nice to see. I hope my kids can come. I hope my parents can come for the first time as well, which would be wonderful, because they have not been to either Athens, Beijing, or Sydney Olympics, where I've taken part and actually carried the flag twice. So that's a big goal. And then past that, in 2012, 13, 14, I see myself still playing if I'm healthy.
In the vague sense of things, would you be rather thrilled if your two daughters, one of them anyway, went into professional tennis and followed your example? Or would you say, no, be a fashion designer or something?
Yeah, I mean, I would support her regardless, you know. I mean, as long as I think it's a good thing they've chosen. I'll be very supportive if it's sports, because I think sports is a healthy lifestyle. You meet other great friends doing sports. It's good to having to sort of handle the winning, handle the losing. I think it's good at an early age to have that bit of a drive, wanting to be better than someone else, but at the same time also you're gonna, you know, be beaten as well sometimes, and to just learn those experiences, I think is a good thing. That's why sports is great. I think tennis is obviously a great sport, very fair play. So I'd be very supportive of that, but it's not the main priority right now.
No, that's right. And television, of course, is a very pure career too.
Yeah.
Very good for you. It's a joy to talk like this, and
Thank you.
let's hope this is the first of many, because it's.
I hope so.
I look forward to this moment, and it's been
Thank
even
you.
better than I expected. Great
Pleasure
fun.
too. Thank
Have
you.
a great week.
Thank you. I hope so.
Now, ask any pundit where the world's future lies, and the chances are that the name of China will be first off their lips. Yes, it seems suddenly certain that Beijing will be running the show any day, any year, any decade now. But is it really so inevitable? Is China really the new Rome? Or could it be rather just, so to speak, the new Italy, which is different? I'm joined now by two seasoned China watchers. Here in London by Martin Jacques, author of the best-selling book When China Rules the World. Welcome to you, Martin. And a warm welcome there to Patrick Chovanec, who is joining us right now from China's Tsinghua University. Patrick, welcome.
Very good to be here.
And it's very good to know you're there too. And Martin, all this fantastic growth in China, how do you think it's going to translate to what many people feel is its inevitable economic, dominance? Or do you not think it will do that?
I do think it'll do that.
You do?
I mean, yeah. I mean, not because China is exceptional, but because in this instance, China's rise will be like that of any power. As it becomes economically strong, then it can exercise more political, cultural, and military influence, and so on. And I think you can already feel this process beginning to take place. The best place to look at first is not here in Europe, where we are now, but, for example, in East Asia, where a third of the world's population lives, and it's very apparent that China is already exercising considerable political and diplomatic influence in the region.
Patrick, what do you make of that? What Martin is saying there. Where do you stand on that?
I don't think that anyone can question the accomplishments of China over the past 30 years and the fact that China is going to play a big role in all of our lives. Where perhaps I might differ is the notion that China will have a smooth, inexorable rise to a position of predominance. I see China as being at a real crossroads, similar to where Japan was in the 1980s. And that China really needs to adapt in some very substantial ways or else lose its way, as Japan did.
So what about that thought that China, rather than maintaining its worldwide unbeaten record of dominance or whatever, that in fact it could go the way of Japan and take the wrong course and get up a blind alley or whatever?
Of course, things did go wrong for Japan. But I think that the question of China and Japan is very different. You know, Japan was already, when it hit the bubble economy and then the post-bubble crisis, it was already a very advanced country. It was already, on a par with the Western world. Whereas China's in a very different situation. So essentially, I think the kind of crisis that hit China, that hit Japan, will not be faced by China in the same way. That doesn't mean that China, of course, can't face another kind of crisis. But I think that the equation with Japan is probably inappropriate.
That's interesting, yeah. Back to you, Patrick, on that point. That the Japan symbol is not necessarily relevant.
I think that he raises a very valid point, which is that China has reached this point of decision, this crossroads, at a stage that's much earlier in its process of development than Japan, and so the pressure will be on China to adapt, much more than Japan, which had already achieved a level of comfort. However, I think that there are a lot of really substantive similarities to the two cases, at least in the coming years, and that will really shape China's future over the next decade. I mean, China faces the same challenge of shifting from an export-driven growth model to a domestic consumption-driven growth model, and it also faces the same challenge of doing so on a record of success. And in many ways, nothing is more vulnerable than entrenched success. And so, and at the same time, you know, people are talking about China in very much the same way that they were talking about Japan in the 1980s as having a superior model. And I think that the danger is that leads to a level of complacency.
Back to you again. Where does, Martin, where does the role of the Communist Party fit into this future history we're talking about here? I mean, it's held on to a lot of its power, hasn't it, in China? Not all of it, but because there's new economic models and so on. But I mean, what role will the Communist Party be having in China in 30 years' time?
That is a very difficult question to answer. What is clear is that the Chinese Communist Party has proved a very successful ruling system for China since 1949, but especially since 1978, because it has presided over this process. It's been essentially the architect of it. Although predictions of its demise have been multifarious in the West, especially since 1989, in fact, the Chinese Communist Party essentially is as robust and as secure now as it has been at any point, if not more so, because, you know, it enjoys great prestige amongst the Chinese to preside over this kind of growth and this kind of transformation in living standards. Now, of course, nothing stands still, and this kind of transformation is changing expectations, changing aspirations, changing the way people see things, changing what they expect from governance. So we won't be dealing with a static picture. The Chinese Communist Party will have to keep changing, will have to keep transforming, and become more accountable, become more responsive.
It's shown some adaptability, greater than most other communist parties when they were in power, hasn't it? Some adaptability, but the question must be how much, I suppose. Patrick, what do you feel?
I would say much more adaptability, because actually the feature of the Soviet Communist Party, for example, was its complete inability until it was too late to make any kind of serious change. Whereas one's got to remember, you know, that in the 1970s, the end of Mao and the beginning of Deng Xiaoping saw an extraordinary shift in the strategy from essentially, well, an unusual mixture, but strong central planning towards something which was very different.
How do you see that from where you are?
The key, really, my first visit to China was in 1986. I spent a lot of time here in the 1990s. I've been a private equity investor here, sat down with a lot of entrepreneurs, and the key to China's economic miracle over the past 30 years has really been the courage in many ways of Chinese politicians getting out of the way for the first time and allowing people in China to create value, to live the way that they want to live. And there's an open question about whether that's going to continue, or whether the state is going to crowd out private dynamic initiative.
We thank you very much indeed,
thank you,
Martin. And Patrick, over there in Tsinghua, thank you very much indeed. Leaders of NATO's 28 member states are meeting in Lisbon today and tomorrow to discuss the future of the alliance. 2 decades on from the end of the Cold War, the organisation faces a dramatically different set of security challenges in the forms of global jihad, nuclear proliferation, cyber terrorism and so on. All these must be met amidst heavy reductions in defence spending from many of its member states and the task of extracting itself eventually, or in 2015 or when, from a nation-building exercise that's extremely hard going, of course, in Afghanistan. The burden for all of this falls upon the Secretary-General of NATO, Anders Fogh Rasmussen, and he joins me now, I'm delighted to say, from the conference in Lisbon, which has just begun this morning. How's it going so far, Anders?
It's going very well, and I look very much forward to a successful and very productive summit, a summit where we're going to take major decisions on the future of our alliance, and notably to adopt a new strategic concept that will describe the core tasks of NATO in the coming years.
And in terms of Afghanistan, is that the main item on the agenda, really?
Yes, indeed. Afghanistan will be at the very top of our agenda. But first and foremost, we will agree on comprehensive reforms of our own alliance. We will launch a new start in our relationship with Russia. But of course, our operation in Afghanistan is our most important military mission right now, and we will make the announcement at this summit that a gradual transition to lead Afghan responsibility is about to start at the beginning of 2011, and we will approve President Karzai's ambition that Afghan security forces should take lead responsibility all over Afghanistan by the end of 2014.
And so by 2015, will it be possible to say that the Taliban has been defeated, or can you never defeat the Taliban, you can only subdue the Taliban? Or do you have to negotiate?
We will prevail, and we will build up the capacity of Afghan security forces, train and educate Afghan soldiers and Afghan police so that they can take over the combat role once the international troops leave Afghanistan. So the Taliban can't wait us out. We will not leave Afghanistan until we assure that the Afghan security forces can take responsibility. And this is a reason why we have strengthened our training mission with a view to build up the number of Afghan soldiers and Afghan police to a level of 300,000 by the end of next year.
There are going to be, for instance, Russia supplying helicopters and so on in support of NATO, which is a further development, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. I would expect the NATO-Russia summit meeting here in Lisbon to agree on an Afghanistan package that will strengthen Russia's contribution to our operation in Afghanistan. I would expect three elements. Firstly, a helicopter package where we establish a trust fund to finance education of helicopter personnel in Afghanistan. We will also agree to enhance the current transit arrangement through Russia, the transport of ISAF cargo. And finally, we will reinforce our cooperation within counter-narcotics. So it will be a very substantial package.
Do you think that, in fact, Russia could... I remember once interviewed about to be President Putin, and I asked him whether, and this was back in 2000, whether, in fact, that Russia could join NATO, and he was saying, I don't see why not. A lot's happened since then, but do you think it might ever happen, perhaps in your time there, that Russia would join NATO?
Well, of course, you never know what will happen in the future. According to NATO's treaty, we may invite European countries that can contribute to security in the Euro-Atlantic area, in Europe and North America, and that are in a position to further the principles on which NATO is built. Such countries may be invited to join our alliance, and in principle, it also includes Russia. But having said that, I also realize that it's not realistic to expect Russia to apply for membership of NATO. So I think a more realistic approach would be to develop a strategic partnership between NATO and Russia. And with the word strategic, I mean a partnership that goes beyond practical cooperation, but also includes political consultation.
And in terms of future policy, one of the things that President Karzai was saying to me in Kabul last month, he said that his country has lost 3 generations of its educated elite to exile. Does Afghanistan today have the manpower, do you think, to form a government, to run effective institutions and have a real civil service as well? Do you think they've got the personnel to do that?
I'm confident that we can gradually build up the capacity of the Afghan government. But obviously Afghanistan is faced with a huge challenge because of 30 years of war and civil war in Afghanistan. So the international community must stay committed to assisting the Afghan government in the build-up of capacity. We have to make sure that we see improved governance, including a determined fight against corruption and drugs trade, that we see stable and solid governmental institutions in Afghanistan that are capable to deliver basic services to the Afghan people. All these elements are essential if we are to ensure long-term peace and stability in Afghanistan. And I'm confident that we can accomplish that gradually during the coming years.
So you really feel that in 2015, the magic target date, you'll be able to lead those forces out of Afghanistan and knowing that Afghanistan is safely in good hands in 2015?
I'm confident that we can achieve that goal, but I think we will see the presence of international troops in Afghanistan also beyond 2014, but we will change the role of our troops from a combat role into a more supportive role. We will continue to assist the Afghan security forces to make sure that they can actually take full responsibility for the security in their own country.
One other footnote, Anders, there's been a lot of discussion about torture in the press on and off over the last few weeks, and most recently in connection with waterboarding. As NATO, does NATO ever consider that torture can be justified if it saves lives?
Of course, not at all. It's unacceptable. I mean, we are in Afghanistan to make sure that Afghanistan becomes a secure and stable country, not a safe haven for terrorists. But we are also in Afghanistan to make sure that we see a political development towards solid and stable governmental institutions that respect basic human rights. And when you are in the business of human rights, then you also have to lead by example. So we cannot fight to defend basic human rights principles if we violate these principles ourselves. So torture is completely unacceptable.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you again.
Well, thanks to the Secretary General joining us there from Lisbon. That's all we have time for this week, unfortunately. My thanks to all my guests. Do join us again in just 7 days' time for another Frost Over the World. Goodbye for now.